Texas is appealing a federal judicial panel's ruling striking down the state's recently passed congressional maps as racially gerrymandered. Another federal judge strikes down for more school districts state requirements to display the Ten Commandments in classrooms. Congress nearly unanimously approves a measure to compel the Justice Department to release the Epstein files, and new polling suggests trouble for Republicans heading into next year's midterms. And that's just some of what's going on in politics. Let's talk about it now in our regular Wednesday political roundup today with Rice University political science fellow Mark Jones and University of Houston political science professor and co-host of Party Politics, Brandon Rottinghaus. Good morning to you both.
Morning, Craig.
Morning, Craig.
All right, a three-judge panel Tuesday struck down those new Texas congressional maps, saying there is substantial evidence they've been racially gerrymandered. Lawmakers can redraw the lines for political advantage, but not on racial grounds. The state's appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court. In the meantime, what happens as we head into next year's midterms?
Well, chaos in the meantime, and a lot of waiting. Obviously, the court's going to have to sort this out. They're going to have to sort this out alongside a Louisiana case that essentially could wipe away a big chunk of the Voting Rights Act, which was a huge basis for how race is used in these districts or not. So there's just a lot of uncertainty. And the kind of chaos is really connected to the nature of the filing deadline, which is less than a month away. And people want to know what district they're running for, as you can imagine. So that's plus voter confusion is just creating a little bit of kind of consternation right now.
Yeah, I guess, Mark, we have existing Congress people who are wondering if their district will still exist, in what form it will still exist. Should they run in another district? And all of that depends on how this is ultimately sorted out.
Right, and what I expect Texas will be doing today or maybe tomorrow will be asking for an emergency stay. That will first go to Samuel Alito, who's the justice responsible for the Fifth Circuit. He can make a decision. If he grants that stay, then we revert back to the new maps that were drawn this summer. And then if the Supreme Court takes time to resolve it, once we pass that December 8th deadline, they may decide, well, it's too late to go back to the districts that are currently in place. We have to use these new ones. On the other hand, Alito could say, no, this is a decision I'm not going to make myself. I'm going to take it to the whole Supreme Court. And we're going to, as a group, vote on whether we're going to grant the stay or not. If they grant the stay, then if they grant the stay at the Supreme Court level, all justices, then we are likely to see us use the maps that were passed this summer. On the other hand, if they say no and they don't grant the stay, then we're more likely than not going to be using the districts that are currently in place, that were drawn in 2021. And the Supreme Court may, though, decide to extend that filing deadline of December 8th by a little bit, but it's mass chaos. And this is where it brings into what's called the Purcell principle, and that's one of the things that the justices will be debating, and that's the idea that you shouldn't be changing the rules of the game when you get so close to an election period, such as the filing by December 8th.
That said, we're always close to an election period. I mean, there's constantly deadlines and constantly elections. I would think they might be erring on the side of one way or another we should resolve this and do so quickly, right?
Yeah, the court was, I think, pretty unhappy about this process. You can see the discontent dripping through the entire ruling, and it definitely was a rebuke to Donald Trump. They even slapped around the governor and the legislature a little bit in terms of their legal reasoning, the whole process. So it's politics as usual, but I think, as you note, that they'd like to have this resolved. The opinion quotes Justice Roberts saying basically that this is a racially discriminatory, and the only way to stop that is to stop doing it. And that, to me, is, I think, a good evidence that what you're saying is true, where they'd love to be able to put a pin in this, but the thing is that it's going to just continue. And this floodgates that's opened after Donald Trump recommended that the states redistrict is never going to end unless the courts step in and say enough is enough.
I'm wondering if that's part of it, too, just in terms of not so much resolving things in Texas, but resolving things nationwide. Can one Supreme Court decision do that?
I'm not sure if this is the case for that. They would have to resolve it related to mid-decade redistricting, and that's not really what's up right now. This is more based on a Voting Rights Act violation. I really, overall, I think the real question is, does the Supreme Court step in and say, no, this is too late? That is, if the three-judge panel had made this decision before filing started, it would have been okay. But now it's too late. We need to stick with the districts that everybody was filing under until yesterday. But then the opposite of that would be say, no, these districts are sufficiently gerrymandered based off race, which is illegal, and therefore we shouldn't allow them to go through. It's going to be up to the justices to decide where do they want to err, and potentially this could be something that Samuel Alito, the one justice who does have the ability to grant the stay, decides on his own. And he could say, I'm going to grant the stay, and the clock would simply run out, and then we'd be left with a fait accompli of, well, I guess we have to use the districts that were drawn this summer because filing is closed.
Meantime, there is still a congressional race to resolve in the 18th district in a runoff election now set for January 31st between Harris County Attorney Christian Menefee and former Houston City Council member Amanda Edwards. Why did Governor Abbott set this for January 31st instead of next month when we've traditionally seen runoff elections?
Well, the short answer is that he was constrained by the law that basically requires there to be enough time for ballots overseas to be counted. So there is a kind of guidepost there that they have to fit. This was, of course, a delay in general. So I think to your point, it's obviously that this is an open seat for about 11 months. That's a long time to not have representation. There is analysis that suggests that when it's the case that you've got an open district and a political divide between the member of the district and the governor of the state, then it's a longer time to call for an election. So it's not surprising we found it this way, but there are real implications to this, not just for the people who live in this district and the candidates who are running in it, but also the kind of future of how this election is handled. So a little bit extra time here may help Amanda Edwards to be able to make up some ground. I think Christian Menefee goes into this with a bit of an advantage, and this is an opportunity for her maybe to find a bit of a different gear and use this extra time to be able to move forward.
In another blow to Governor Abbott and Republicans in the state legislature, another federal judicial ruling has struck down display of the Ten Commandments in public school classrooms in more districts across the state, this time including Conroe ISD here in the Houston area. This follows a previous ruling blocking the displays in Houston, Cy-Fair, and Fort Bend ISDs. Ultimately, 25 districts across the state now cannot do this. This is mostly in major metro areas, but the rest of the state's districts still can. Mark, how come? Why don't these rulings apply statewide?
Well, because they're related to these specific cases and that it's not sort of a blanket application. And this was always something that was going to be an issue with this legislation. That is, it was presented as something that was historical and educational. That is, since based on the idea that the foundational ideals of the United States were based off the Ten Commandments, therefore it would be included in schools. Now, that was always going to run into this type of legal challenge as a violation of church and state, and that's what we're seeing sort of scattered across these different rulings.
Similar lawsuits have challenged nearly identical laws in these other states. Through Judge Panel of the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals blocked Louisiana's Ten Commandments law statewide. Federal courts blocked the law in several Arkansas school districts. Is this ultimately then, Brandon, just a foregone conclusion that the Texas law will eventually be struck down statewide?
It likely will. It has many of the same hallmarks of those laws, but to be honest, it may not matter. I mean, this is a messaging moment for Republicans. They can use this legal fight to be able to prime the idea that this is kind of this jurisdictional battle about the way that the religion is part of American politics and life in Texas. They have waged this battle for a long time, and now we're just seeing a kind of new front open up.
Right. I mean, we have a long history in the Texas legislature of Republicans passing legislation that they know is very likely to be challenged in court and lose in court. But the goal is to pass it and show and demonstrate to primary voters and others that they are pushing forward this agenda, even if the courts end up blocking it or striking it down.
It's pretty rare to see Congress overwhelmingly across party lines agree on much of anything. But that's what we saw Tuesday over release of the Epstein files. In the House, all but one member of Congress voted to call for the Justice Department to release them. Then the Senate approved the House's measure without a formal vote, a way to say we all want this without being on the record saying they all want it, I guess. Can we assume the president will actually sign this?
He said he will, and I think the reason you saw the numbers that you did in this with everyone except for one person voting in the House in favor was that the president basically signaled that he was going to make this happen. I think that this is a moment where you're seeing a lot of transitional interest in Congress. First of all, Congress is back. They're able to make some choices here and to oversee what's going on in a way that they haven't for a little while. And although this is just one kind of piece of this, I do think it represents a kind of bigger effort for Congress to be able to step into that fight. It's also the case that this may show us some cracks in the MAGA army, or that Donald Trump basically has really had a sizable control over the Republican Party. This is a moment where he didn't, and he had to kind of lean into it, almost like the French politician who famously said, like, there go my people, I have to hurry up and lead them.
Right.
And so this is a potential kind of crack where it may grow bigger if it's not tended to.
Forgive me for any hint of conspiratorial anything in these next few questions. I just want to kind of get this out there. How will we know if what's released is everything?
We probably will not, but there's also been enough leaks and there have been enough people who have seen broader swaths of the files that if things aren't released, we are likely to hear about it from someone who actually read it. I mean, this hasn't been a tightly controlled process. And so there are a lot of people who know what is in the files. And if something is not released, that could become more of a scandal and more of a liability than just actually releasing it.
Could elements of it, long stretches of it, be redacted? Could we see a lot of black lines through a lot of material here?
There's always that risk. The other caveat here is that because Donald Trump ordered the investigation of some Democrats who were connected to this, there's an ongoing Department of Justice investigation. That could mean that some of the features of these files aren't able to be released because they are part of that investigation. Again, I think you're exactly right. Conspiracy theorists will question whether this is all of it and how far it goes. You're never going to see the end of that. That's just the nature of these. But it certainly is the case that we're seeing a real kind of movement here that does reflect, I think, a change in the politics of
You
this.
mentioned the ongoing investigation element of it. Are there other things that might be characterized as delay tactics that we should be, keeping an eye out for?
I mean, it's possible. I think one interesting aspect of these files is all of the collateral damage of people that we wouldn't necessarily associate with Epstein. We saw that with former Harvard President Larry Summers, whose career reputation essentially has spiraled down the toilet in a matter of days because of his long relationship with Epstein. And it's quite possible, given that Epstein's modus operandi was effectively sucking up to powerful people and becoming their friends and confidants, there may be other emails and texts in there that we start to see other people who right now haven't been in the spotlight, but now will be tied to Epstein and will be very adversely affected, such as Summers.
Brandon Rottinghaus is the co-host of Houston Public Media's Party Politics program. You can catch it Friday nights at 7:30 on News 88.7, Friday nights at 8 on Houston Public Media TV 8. It's available on YouTube as well, and wherever you get your podcasts. Brandon is also a political science professor at the University of Houston. Mark Jones is a political science fellow at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Brandon, Mark, thank you both very much.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Craig.